Okay, tell me about Nagasaki.
As we are all now aware, the atomic explosion over Nagasaki was the second atomic blast. No one had told us anything about the first one whatsoever, and so we were on a mission to Japan that day, the second day, and were told in the briefing not what we were going to see, but that to stay at least 30 miles away from Nagasaki and not to get under 35,000 feet. Well, as we, in the combat zone, a flight of a squadron, the flights of 4 are split 2 and 2. So half are watching east and half are watching west. In the event the other gets jumped by fighters, enemy fighters, they turn into each other to protect each other's tail. So half were facing toward Nagasaki and the other half were not. So when the explosion went off, no one had any idea what it was. And I don't like to use the term, but it was typical military vocabulary at the time. All of a sudden, the squadron broke radio silence, and they said, "Jesus Christ, they've hit an ammo dump." That's all they could think of could make such an explosion, was an ammunition dump. But within a matter of minutes, the cloud was already at an altitude greater than us, than we were at 35,000 feet. So it wasn't until we returned from the mission that we were told what we had seen, and that it was the second of the 2 atomic blasts. The first one was 2 days before, I think, and then, on the little island we were based, Hiroshima, I-E-S-H-I-M-A. Shima is the word for island. On Hiroshima, we were told that the Japanese had been ordered to send a delegation to the Philippines to be told about the surrender. And so we were expecting, and they came. 3 or 4 planes they were directed to have them painted white with green crosses on them. And they came, and the Japanese crews and the planes stayed on Hiroshima, and they transferred the men, the diplomats, to American planes and flew them to the Philippines to meet with, I guess, MacArthur and the others for the surrender. So that's the tale of the seeing the actual blast over Nagasaki.
Let me go back a second. Let me ask you questions for my personal benefit. So Iwashima, that's your base that you're based at.
Yes.
When did y'all leave that morning? What time did y'all leave that morning for that mission?
What time?
Uh-huh.
I don't remember.
What was your mission?
We were going to Osaka, Nagoya, and Tokyo, as I recall. And that would have been, Nagasaki would have been on the way.
Are you escorting the bombers?
Hiroshima was a little island 2 miles by 4 miles in size, just off the shore of Okinawa, the big island.
Uh-huh.
And the reason it was a fighter base, was that there was already a Japanese coral landing strip there. So they just, at the invasion of Okinawa, they took over that little island and immediately put a fighter group there flying off of Hiroshima. And there was a great war correspondent who was killed on Hiroshima. And
Ernie Powell?
uh,
Was that Ernie Powell?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
and he was killed on Hiroshima. So that was why we were there. And a matter of fact is there were still pockets of resistance, Japanese resistance, there at the time, because they immediately did that. And in the Big Island of Okinawa, as soon as the surrender was completed, the little island of Hiroshima was too difficult to supply. It had no docks. You couldn't dock a thing. So all the fuel and everything else had to be brought in on old LSTs that would come in and let the front down. And so we all had to pack up we flew all the planes over to the Big Island, and then on a certain date, we were to vacate the island of Hiroshima, and it was raining, and here was high-ranking flyers, majors, lieutenant colonels, down there getting wet to get on this old rusty tub to be taken over to the Big Island. And so all of us were so used to sleeping on a regular old army cot they gave us two old sticky wool blankets, one of which you rolled up a pillow and the other kept you warm at night. So I was walking down the deck of that old ship, that old LST, and looked into a porthole, and lo and behold, here was a room that had a little rug on the floor. There was a bed with actual sheets on it, white sheets on it, shined black shoes under the bed. And so I stopped a sailor, and I said, "Sailor, my God, who lives in there? An admiral?" He said, "No, that's the skipper's quarters." I said, "Well, what is the skipper?" He said, "He's a Lieutenant J.G." I said, "You mean he's living like that, and we've been living on the ground for all this time on Hiroshima?" He said, "Well, that's the advantage of the Navy, sir."
But on the day of the Nagasaki, were you guys escorting a bomber mission?
We never did.
But what were you going to do?
We never did. It was a fighter strike.
Okay.
If we were going to the southern island of Kyushu, which was the nearest one to Okinawa, we could carry 500-pound bombs under each wing, and what they called back then rockets, 10 rockets. And the model of the P-47 for the Pacific had little pockets in all over the wings to carry extra fuel. So there was a 90-some gallons internally in all these little pockets in each wing. And if we were going as far as Tokyo, you had to use wing tanks, and you used them up first, of course, and dropped them in the ocean. And then you couldn't take, obviously, bombs and wing tanks. So for long missions, and that particular type of mission, we caught, I don't remember whether it was on that particular one or not. We caught a Japanese a naval ship in the Sea of Japan, and we had already gotten rid of our, I guess it must have been near Kyushu, because we didn't have any bombs left. So we started strafing that Navy ship. We had plenty of ammunition, and the captain ran it aground, ran the ship aground, and we set it on fire with our firepower. And I hate to even think about it at this time in my life, but the Japanese sailors were jumping off into the water, and we were shooting them. So we got credit for destroying that Navy ship.
So that day, you were supposed to do a couple of bomb missions, and you just happened to be near Nagasaki's
Yes.
blast. When the blast went off, how far away do you think you were from the blast?
Oh, Paul,
Best guesstimate.
15 miles,
15 miles.
something like that.
Did you experience any kind of an aftershock?
No.
Anything malfunction on the instrument board or
No.
anything? Wow,
No.
just a massive blast.
Exactly. When you stop and think about it, think about an infantry. They run into let's say a German or a Japanese, what they call a machine gun nest.
Mm-hmm.
So here's 3 men, 3 soldiers, and a 30 caliber machine gun. And it stopped the whole thing, and they'd call for air power to come get rid of that one
Nest.
30 caliber machine gun.
Uh-huh.
The P-47 had 8 50 calibers, 4 in each wing.
Wow.
That is an enormous amount of firepower. And about every other round, or every third round, I think, was an incendiary. And then there was an armor-piercing in the belt. But we had a huge amount of firepower when you think of 8 50 caliber.
That's incredible. All right, now, take me back to how did you sign up for pilot's school?
All right.
How old are you, and what year is it?
I was at Duke, and it was about 20 of us that the week after Pearl Harbor
Okay.
went down and volunteered for pilot training.
How old are you?
Well, I was probably, wait a minute, '18 and 19.
Okay.
And they swore us in, but they said, we got no place to put you. We have no planes, we have no instructors, we have nothing yet to train pilots. So you'll have to stay in school, and we'll call you up. You've been sworn in. We'll call you in for pilot training when we can train you. And so we went back to school, and back then, of course, there was no such thing as the Air Force. It was the Army Air Corps, was part of the Army. And the Army Air Corps, in its infinite wisdom, back then, pilots had to have at least 2 years of college to get into pilot training. So because they were going to expand it so dramatically, they decided to give exams to all those who were hopefully going to be pilots. And depending on what they made an exam, they opened in colleges all around the country something called a college training detachment. And depending on what you made on this exam, you were there for a minimum of 3 months, a maximum of 6 months. Get this, taking freshman college courses. How utterly stupid to call you out when you were a junior in college to send you to get freshman college courses when you could have finished school. But the only ones, they sent me to Clemson, which at that point was an all-male military school. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, there's a college called Winthrop,
Yes.
which at that point was 5,000 girls, a girls' school. They put a college training detachment there. And those guys, 250 of them, among 5,000 girls whose boyfriends were in the service, they just said, "Leave us alone, forget us, we'll be right here, we're not going anywhere." So I had to stay 3 months at Clemson taking freshman college courses. And then you started your actual pilot training. And first it was a motor, a test of your motor ability. And then if you got through that, you went to pre-flight in Montgomery, Alabama, in the middle of the summertime.
So you were at Clemson and now you're going to Alabama.
You went from Clemson to Nashville, where you took these motor tests and
okay.
what have you. And so you could get washed out there. Then you went to pre-flight in Montgomery, and they worked your mortal tail off, getting you in physical condition. So you, they ran you miles and miles and miles, and a lot of. Then they also taught you at pre-flight Morse code and some aircraft recognition to recognize German and Japanese planes. I remember that part at Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama. So then from there you went to primary flying school. And in primary, that was an open is there an open cockpit?
Yeah, right here.
No, I mean a biplane.
Right here.
Okay. Now that's primary. And that's the first actual airplane that you flew. So you could get washed out in primary. Then from primary, which is had a instructor right behind you in the thing. And of course, it was cold. So if you got through primary, the next step you went to basic.
Now is primary also in
Primary is
in Montgomery?
No, primary was Albany, Georgia.
Okay.
And then from primary, this was the first plane in basic, closed cockpit, and that was in Moultrie, Georgia, in basic. Then from basic, if you got through basic training, you went to advanced.
Okay, hold on a second. In basic training here, is it just the standard takeoffs and landings and
Yeah,
just
well,
basic
they also-
flying?
You also did a little bit of a dead reckoning, like a fly trip up to Dothan, Alabama and back. A little bit of navigation,
Okay.
which is it. Then you went from that to advanced.
All right.
And advanced is you flew the AT-6, which was again a closed cockpit. The gear retracted, which this did not. And that was the last. When you got through, if you got through advanced, is when you got your wings and your commission.
Okay, go back
And
to
that picture.
the advanced training.
That was advanced.
Tell me about advanced training.
Well, advanced was
What do you learn in advanced training?
a lot more cross country, instrument flying. They had a thing that would put over your head, but
Okay.
you could see only the instrument. You couldn't see anything outside.
Okay.
Because the Navy used to accuse